It's your boy Tahir Johnson, and I'm excited to be bringing you this dope panel today with some of the leading cannabis entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry to talk about social justice, social equity, and entrepreneurship in cannabis. So without further ado, I'm going to get into some brief introductions. First, I want to introduce Berner, the CEO of Cookies. Cookies, one of the largest cannabis brands in the world. This brother has come from not only being a hip hop artist, but from the traditional market to build an amazing company. So we're looking forward to hearing from you today. My big sister, Wanda James, the first Black dispensary owner in the country. Not only has she had a long political career, but she's been putting on the first dispensary owner there in Colorado. I'm so happy to have you and all of your experience. Hope Wiseman, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here in the industry, reading about you. My Spelman sister, HBCU Black Excellence, the youngest Black woman dispensary owner in the country, doing big things for my home state here in Maryland. My brother, Shayuna Dadeji, man, I got to say, one of my best friends in the world, youngest Black man to own a dispensary in the country, has come from a background not only being arrested for cannabis at 14, but now turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. I'm so glad to have you here. And my friend Melissa, with the New York State Director of DPA. New York just legalized cannabis and also passed one of the most progressive social equity bills that we've seen yet. So I'm sure that you have some great insight to share with us. So I'm really excited for everything that y'all are going to drop. And again, thank you to Reverend Sharpton, National Action Network, for letting us have this critical conversation here on your platform. So first things first, I just want to talk about, as we all know, the cannabis industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? We're talking about one that brought in over $20 billion in US revenue last year, but people of color have very little ownership in the industry. I know the last report I saw said that it was about less than 2% Black ownership. All of you have been able to, from the entrepreneur side, been able to build amazing businesses. Really, we're one in an area that we've had challenges in as Black and brown people. But also, so could anybody who wants to lead, and maybe Wanda, you, as the first, Black dispensary owner in the country, could you talk a little bit about the significance of that and, what's important about the cannabis business?
So, there's so much about the cannabis business, right? Because people ask all the time, like, why are we so focused on growing more and more Black and brown owners in this industry? And why should that be a focus, especially at a time when so many white-owned businesses are basically gobbling up the industry? The reason why is because this was built on our backs, right? Mass incarceration is because of cannabis arrest. And that has been an issue, for the last 88 years. But what we look at is 800,000 people a year before legalization arrested for simple possession. Then they had states like Colorado that turned around when we legalized that didn't allow anybody that had a felony conviction on their record to be an owner, or you couldn't even work in the industry if your felony was within less than 10 years. Thank God all of that has changed and we're starting to look at it very differently. But what we effectively did was cut out all of the visionaries from having first mover advantage, which means all of these large chains and hedge fund backed companies all were able to swoop in while the Black and brown visionaries were getting out of jail, trying to get their records expunged, and being slave labor for many of America's corporations. So this is why it's so important to fight for and to see more Black and brown ownership in this space. But unfortunately, we're losing this battle because, as you know, in Colorado, 717 dispensaries, very few are owned by Black and brown people. And as a matter of fact, the state of Colorado won't even tell us what that number is.
And to touch on what Wanda is saying, the biggest component we're missing right now is capital and access to capital. It's not that we're not smart enough. It's not that we don't have creativity. It's just that we don't have the resource, nor do we have the network of high net worth people that are willing to give us capital. This is the biggest problem we're facing right now. We have hustler. Hope is a hustler. I know Wanda be hustling. Cookies, he made a way when there was no way, so he has the blueprint where we're looking at, and he made it happen. So we know that it is possible, right? It is possible, it is doable, because we have someone right here that did it. You get what I'm saying? So my biggest thing right now is, outside of all the states talking about social equity, they need to put their mouth, like their money where their mouth is. One, they need to remove real estate as a criteria. I say this every single time I'm on a panel. I just don't understand why you need real estate before you open your business, and then you want people to have social equity, and it takes them 3 years minimum to go through the process and get their business open. So for example, guys, you have specific zoning that you can put your business in. So you have to be in zone A, right? So that's the only place you can put retail. That's one obstacle. It limits your option for real estate. A second one is we have 280E. We're still federally illegal. And because we're still federally illegal, the real estate cannot be attached to a federally owned bank, essentially, or you have to pay a tremendous amount of capital to pay for the property. And like I said initially, we don't have money like that. So an average lease, because of that supply and demand, people are charging an arm and a leg to just lease out a property. For example, in Boston, people are charging about $100,000 a month just to lease out a property in the hopes of winning a license. So these licenses are not even guaranteed. So even when we have capital, we still have a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's definitely trippy the way they do that. I mean, it leaves everyone out the mix except, real estate tycoons that can just grab up all that property, sit on it, wait till they get a license, then come bring something to us, right? And so I think the first step that made me kind of fired up and feeling like the social equity program is actually going to have some hope was what New York did. Seeing that they're allocating some of the taxes to actual equity applicants is huge, because I've always said we're getting charged 30% tax. There's 280E, which cripples us from reporting any of our earning, like deducting any of our costs and whatnot. So the fact that New York is taking some of that tax and giving it, and I would love to see the way it works, but that's what I've been preaching forever. There needs to be an allocated budget for people to start their business. It was tough what I had to do. It was really hard. And I'm glad that I stuck with my gut, because a lot of people tried to take advantage of me in the process. And I just stayed down. I kept working. I found some partners that trusted my vision. But, the Black and brown, businesses in the cannabis space is scarce. And that's why I've been pushing so hard with Cookies, because everywhere we go, we're trying to empower as much as we can. And if I can stay in the room with the big boys, and I can make it known that when we go somewhere, we actually really identify with the culture and with what people want. And we've been risking our freedom. I've been risking my freedom for about 21 years now with cannabis, 19, 20 years legally. It's tough, obstacles. So salute to New York, and I encourage any other markets that open up to take some of that high tax revenue that we're paying and give it to people that deserve to get in business.
Yeah, I just want to build on what you were just saying right now about what New York just passed through, because we did try to learn from exactly what you were saying, Wanda, about the fact that people who had the most expertise with the plant within the legacy market had been blocked out in so many other places. So not only making sure that there would be those avenues for folks to be able to transition in, but that there would actually be resources behind it, much to your point, Bernard, making sure that there's actually funding from the jump for the incubator program. So having the goal of 50% of the licenses going to social equity participants, but not stopping there, because we've seen in other states that because of the lack of access to small business loans that are problematic across all sorts of other sectors, let alone because of federal prohibition and making it virtually impossible for folks to be able to get that capital, being able to have that built in from the very beginning in New York, to be able to have low and zero interest loans that'll be part of that incubator program. And then separately, having the community grants reinvestment fund. So once the tax revenue is coming in, that there would be direct restitution going back to communities that paid the price for so many years, and making sure that it's a both and, like not trying to split that difference, but being clear, in New York, that was the marijuana arrest capital of the world, certainly of the country, for so long, when we had 800,000 arrests when it was supposedly decriminalized, the vast majority of whom are Black and Latinx New Yorkers, and then all of the other impacts in people's lives. We have to be comprehensive about both acknowledging that harm, atoning for it, and then actually having restitution across all of these different aspects of people's lives.
Well, let's be really clear, though, too. The thing that we need to absolutely fight for right now, though, that we're all talking about, is we can do this state by state by state by state, but that's still going to benefit those large hedge fund backed companies because they're already working in Texas and, you know, and all the states that are not legal. And, you know, a company like Simply Pure, we don't have the resources to have my lobbyist in Texas right now and in Florida right now and in all those different places. So what needs to have happened is we need to legalize. And it's ridiculous at this point, after we've been in it 11 years legally, that we are still having the discussion as to why can't I have a line of credit? Why can't I go to a bank instead of having to go to a private equity person and I need $100,000 to put new lights in my dispensary and they want 20% of my company. I mean, it's obscene what we have to go through. So what needs to have happened now to ensure that Black and brown ownership continues is that we have access to the SBA, to banking. And the only way that that happens is legalization.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I want
100%.
to also congratulate New York for thinking about equity outside of just licensing. You know, I think that a lot of times when we talk about social equity, we're like, oh, Black and brown people deserve a place in this industry, which they do. But at the same time, not every person that was affected or impacted by the war on drugs wants to own a dispensary or a grow. However, their lives have still been flipped and turned upside down and their communities still disenfranchised. So I think it's really important. And I hope that New York leads the front on being transparent about how funds are distributed, and as well as they hold people accountable, hold the government accountable to do what they say. It's been seen in other places that has not happened, and we've exposed them. And like in Portland, we saw much of the tax revenue going to the police departments, which is crazy because the tax revenue from cannabis was going back to the police departments that were still arresting people. So it's just really insane. And I really hope that New York leads the front on that, because I want to say that I think that that's more important than actual equity in the business. I think that that restitution, or even we could call it reparations for what has happened, needs to happen first and foremost. And the automatic expungement of people's records. We need to free all the people in prison right now for doing what we do every day. I think that that's also really crazy. Sometimes when I really think about that, I'm like, wow, there's really somebody sitting in jail right now that maybe got arrested over a pound of weed. And I'm getting, you know, hundreds of pounds shipped to me every month. You know, so I think that that's really, really crazy too. And I applaud New York for what they've done. A lot of other states have tried and not quite hit the mark. So we'll see. I hope that it sets off a wave, especially on the East Coast where I am. I know Maryland has pending adult use legislation that will likely pop up next year and probably get passed. So yeah, New York is definitely leading that.
Yeah,
and just a quick note. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I said New York is a domino effect. You know, I just want to just emphasize on what everybody else was saying. Like, kudos to New York. I love it. I can't wait to see what New York look like once the license are ready to be, you know, applied for. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to clarify for folks, the automatic expungement piece is already in the bill. That's already been enacted as soon as the governor signed the law. So the Office of Court Administration has to take care of that. That isn't an additional cost that anybody has to deal with. It's not an additional hoop that anybody has to deal with at the court level. That's all happening. So don't let anybody come and try to tell you, oh, you got to pay me to go do this thing to clear out your record. Don't. And for people who have immigration considerations, that is a conversation you should have, but there is a track within the bill that addresses that very specifically too. And for people who had like a child welfare case over marijuana, there's also a track to be able to seal that out for people too. So just being really comprehensive, but all of that is moving just as of the enactment date last week. It's already going.
Absolutely. And shout out to all the advocates in New York that made that happen. It definitely was something legendary. Including Reverend Sharpton and NAN. I know the New York NAN chapter was active in that movement. But one thing I really want to talk to you guys about, because you guys have definitely dropped a lot of gems and really set the stage, right? Talking about this industry and what's going on with it. One thing that I always would love to get is advice for, people that look like us and kind of your personal stories to kind of shed some light on how people can get in the game. Shayun, for you, for example, right? I think when we talk a lot about this industry, people being victims of the war on drugs, we often see where having a cannabis charge could be something that throws somebody off for life, right? But you were able to kind of take that and pivot. So, for young brothers out there, especially, could you like maybe share a little bit about your story, and talk a little bit about Elevate and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what's up, guys? So I'm originally from Lagos, Nigeria. I migrated to the United States when I was 5 years old. And when I was just a hustler. We didn't have a wholesome home, but we didn't have much. So we had to hustle. So I was a kid shoveling snow, raking leaves, doing whatever I had to do to make money. I was just a hustler. I was a kid selling candy in a duffel bag. And, it's like, hey, you want some gum? So things like that. So, at a really early age, I got arrested for marijuana possession at 13. And that forever changed my life. I sat there and I was just, it was the toughest thing I had to go through. I got my butt whooping I've never received in my life. I would never forget that whooping. That's how bad it was. And it was, I told the police officer, I was like, I'm a lot safer at the police station than I am at home right now. Like I felt a lot safer. But no, all jokes aside, it forever just made me who I am today, right? It made me tenacious. I learned from my mistakes. I didn't allow failures to really hold me back. And the biggest thing was when I moved to Texas, it was more of a safer place for me, and it gave me the ability to like really think inside and outside the box to see how can I better my life and how can I move in a different way and learn from my lessons in the past, right? So I just kept hustling, and I moved to Washington State. I saw legalization unfold in front of my eyes, and everyone was telling me I need $1 million to get into the cannabis industry. And that at the time seemed intimidating. It was like, oh my God, I'm an African-American man. I didn't go to college. There's no way I'm about to go and raise $1 million. Like I had to look at myself and be truthful. I didn't have any connections. I didn't have any relationship. So I was thinking in my head, like, this is super intimidating. How do I get into the cannabis industry? How do I be a beacon of hope for people that look like me, didn't go to college, didn't grew up in a not such a wholesome home, had trauma, all that stuff. I was like, how can I just be this beacon of hope, right? And I just set out on this audacious journey and saved up every money I could save up. And I remember I had like $50,000. I used to drive 8 hours from like Washington State to Oregon, and just like rejection after rejection, staying on phone calls. And I was like, man, this is tough. I wanted to give up. I was like, am I a crazy person right now? Like, I just got rejections, no, making calls, finding cities. And long story, like it just, I finally had one person believe in me, allowed me to lease out a location in the worst location you could imagine. This location was hidden, yo. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm just going to sign this lease. I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I'm just going to win. I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to win. And I had $50,000 in a dream, and I essentially I built out my whole dispensary, did the security camera, and just like made whatever I needed to do. I just made it happen. And I built out my shop. I remember the lady, the investigator that came and investigated my building. She was like, Sharon, this needs a safe. We had our recorder. It needed to be in a safe. I didn't even know, DVR, whatever it's called. It needed to be a safe and locked. So I remember I went to Office Depot. The safe was super expensive. I couldn't afford it. So I went to Office Depot and I got an office block. Long story short, I just made it into the safe, right? And I just hustled. I slept in my shop from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day for a whole year. It was the hardest, toughest thing I ever did in my life. Like I said, I was like, man, this is tough. Like, this is crazy tough. Like, I thought being an entrepreneur, like, you just get rich overnight, And I really quickly learned I had to pay taxes. I was like, what? They didn't teach me that, you know, and the CPA started talking about numbers and this and that. I was like, what the heck? I gotta pay this? I was like, this is crazy, yo. I thought I'm gonna keep all this money. And I started learning really quickly, right? And I just started like looking at all my failures, and you know, I failed a lot. I failed more times than I succeeded, like truly failed a lot.
But you picked yourself up from it.
You said what?
I said, but you picked yourself up from it, and now you built into this.
Exactly. Just picked myself up, and I just saw it, and we just expanded, right? We saw opportunity in different states, and we just executed. That's it. The reason why I share my journey to where I share it is, you know, we have such a tough, like it's a tough path for us. We have to be honest with ourselves. Like, it's tough. Nobody's gonna give us money, so we have to like out hustle. We have to like really outsmart, like really put ourselves in an uncomfortable position to really win. Because I had to like change myself in the way I think and the way I walk, the way I talk, just so I could be where I'm at today. That's all I have to say. I didn't say it because I hope there's a kid out there that came from where I came from. You could do it, man. You could do it. That's all.
Absolutely. Nah, man. And I feel the emotion in that, man. And you know, I just think about, you know, that is so important. And I know, Wanda, like when you did this, there was no blueprint for it, right? Like I could only imagine, like now we have all of you that we could look at as examples. But there wasn't like any example like that when you could look at. And I always think it's super deep that you tell the story about your brother and like seeing that experience firsthand with cannabis. So I would love to, like, you know, like I said, hear about that journey from Simply Pure and what that was like for you.
I mean, my journey was really different, right? So, you know, I former military officer, former corporate executive, worked for Barack Obama's National Finance Committee, worked as the campaign manager for Congressman Jared Polis, who is now Governor Jared Polis, have worked for more senators and issue-based things. My background has been in politics. You know, I've got more high-end political people on speed dial than most people will ever know. So when folks say, you know, why did you get into this? Well, one, we wanted to put a political face on it because in my world, University of Colorado, all of my friends in Los Angeles that were lawyers, doctors, or whatever, I've never not had cannabis as a part of my life. I'm a connoisseur and have been so since I was 16. First in my family to graduate from college, you know, professional all the way through, never had an issue with the cops. And then I met my brother. And my brother grew up in South Dallas, a dark-skinned Black man, arrested at the age of 17, 18 when he went to prison, 10 years for 4 ounces of weed, 4.5 ounces of weed, bad, what we call Mexican breckweed. I mean, it was more twigs and sticks than it was anything else. And that 4 ounces cost him 10 years of his life in the legal system. And 4 years of that, my Black brother picked cotton in Texas to purchase his freedom. When he told me this story, it was outrageous to me because, yeah, I've had friends that were ticketed, paid a ticket, but nobody went to jail, even at the university level, CUPD. One of the guys in CUPD used to bring us the KGB, the Killer Green Bud. I mean, so, I mean, in my life, weed was never an issue. So to find out that 800,000 people a year were arrested, we decided to open up this dispensary in 2009 as a political statement, something that gave us, you know, charge to be able to talk about the fact that, yeah, I sold 25 pounds of weed yesterday. Now what? So why are you arresting a kid in Alabama, like Hope said, for a dime bag last night? It makes no sense whatsoever. So we have been talking about this since day one, unapologetically. And because I've got, you know, X amount of senators on speed dial and governors that know me well, you know, we've been ferocious about talking about it because what are they going to do? Arrest me? Really? Bring it. You know, so I mean, it's been that way for us for 11 years now. But I still get back to now, you know, the battle is different now, right? So we are getting ready to end criminalization behind this. But like Rosa Parks wanted to ride the bus, right now, our challenge is how do we own the bus, right? And that's where we need to get right now because we don't have that ability without legalization. And if we don't stop the mass conglomerates from happening, you know, and I talk about it a lot here in Colorado, that we have a conglomerate in Colorado that owns 80 to 120 dispensaries, right? What does that mean to you? Well, hope that 80 to 120 dispensaries is fueling what they're doing in Maryland. It's fueling what they're doing in Massachusetts. We just saw a big company come out and sue Massachusetts for social equity after talking all this stuff that it's about social equity. And now they're in Colorado buying up dispensaries. So, I mean, it's crazy when we get down to this. And that's why we as Black entrepreneurs and Black business owners need to stand up and say enough's enough. And just real quick on Sayun, what we need is not going to white cannabis companies to fund Black businesses, because that's stupid. Is Coca-Cola going to ask Pepsi to fund its expansion? No, they're not. What we need is the BE 100, the Black Enterprise 100, the largest 100 Black companies in America to stand up and fund Cookies and fund Simply Pure and fund Elevate and fund Marion Maine. That's what we need to have happen. And that's what we don't see, because Black investors are conservative. And while they don't have a problem with Hennessy, they haven't wrapped their arms around cannabis, and they need to jump on this, because you won't be able to own 25% of Hennessy, but we got 25% of Simply Pure ready to go. So this is where I'm saying the view that we have as Black people needs to change.
Absolutely, that's so important. And Berner, I would love to have you talk a little bit about your journey, because like you said, you came from that traditional market, you've been doing this. But one of the things that's so dope about Cookies, even you being a rapper, like before getting into the legal cannabis market, definitely don't look at Cookies like a celebrity brand. It's real and authentic to the culture. But also what you've been able to grow it to being an international presence is important, as well as the fact that you still continue to give back and support social equity. Like Wanda said, when we get on, we look out for our own. And so even building the companies, it's been a different approach. So I would love for you to just, give your perspective on your journey.
Sure. My journey started with falling in love with bud. When I was young, I smoked. I loved it. And growing up in San Francisco, California, I would see the medical dispensaries, people coming out with the brown bags and the little neon signs. I'm like, what? You can get it out the store? I was infatuated with it. I was so obsessed with it. I used to pay someone that was hanging out in front of the stores to go get me a banana bread and a couple ace of Blue Dot at the time. It was Blue Dot and Max 49. I'd be so happy to be able to get it from the store. And when I turned 18, I started filming a documentary on the store. First thing I did when I turned 18 was got my card, started going to stores, filming a documentary. And the lady there said, well, I heard you're selling weed out of the Tully's coffee shop. And I kind of looked at her and I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, come sell weed here. And that outfit looks silly on you. So why don't you come work here? I'll give you benefits and teach you the game. I'm like, cool. So I started working at the dispensary when I was 18. When I started working there, I fell in love with the fact that it unified people so much. Like, seeing how many people came together over cannabis was incredible to me. Working at the dispensary and actually being on the ground there, I noticed how much this unified people, how much this brought people together. And I love that. Like, I was working with AIDS patients. I was working with off-duty, cops coming in that had PTSD issues, ex-military, like people from the VA would come and see my first dispensary. We'd allow you to medicate there in person. So they come from the VA and come get high and talk to me. I felt like I was in taxi cab confessions. I loved it. I was able to just actually work with people and realize that the dispensary and the medicine was not just good for them, but releasing the mental anguish of them being able to come in and talk to us was big too, right? Then I started seeing the dark side of it. CHP would come in, take all our money. I would fly to Jamaica with my owner, and the feds would pull me off the plane and go through my stuff. And then flying in LAX, which I'll never fly into LAX again. I'd be harassed by the feds and DEA just for working at the dispensary all the time. And then when it went recreational, I started realizing what kind of people are getting in the game. And the thing that I fell in love with, and the reason why I fell in love with it, was not so pure anymore. People are grabbing money. It was a money grab. And the kind of people in the game were not the people that were in the game. And so I said to myself, well, I know why I did this. And I love it so much that I've spent all these years running this dispensary. I'm going to open up a chain. I'm going to put this thing worldwide. I'm going to make sure that before I go, I put a platform out there, not only that still empowers the purpose of bud, which is to unite us. And even if it's recreational, it's still medicine, but also to teach people the business and to give them the game and keep Black and brown business empowered. And so I decided to go head to head with the bigger operators out there. And I used my leverage and my influence from the music to go get myself licensing deals in other markets. And also, I've never actually really shared this. We started our own fund as well to fund our journey, because going to other people was a little tough. They want to change things and maybe change the way I am and kind of take certain things away from the way I do things. And I was like, nah, we're going to fund our own journey and we're going to make sure that we bring this around the world. And we've been able to do some really cool things. And, we opened up the first Black-owned dispensary in San Francisco, first social equity dispensary in SF. We have the first steps of opening up in Harvard Square with my partner Taba, and they hated on that. They didn't want to see Black and Brown partnership open up in Harvard Square. It was a very big deal, and we got past the first steps. And so my journey has been one that loves the bud. I love what it does for people in general, for the humans out there. We need this, and I want to make sure when my time goes or comes that we have the best bud out there possible with operators that know why they're doing what they're doing. And just to touch on the social equity aspect of things, like the stuff I'm doing is like I want to make sure that besides the stuff that people in New York are doing, like providing funding and stuff, knowledge is key. Like you said, brother, you didn't know about the taxes. 280E is tricky. They make these things so tricky that like if you're not gamed up, you're going in to fail, right? And so we have, I'm talking about this for the first time as well, what we're calling Cookies University, where in Humboldt County, we have a dispensary, a cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, consumption lounge, breeding facility, nursery, everything you need to know from A to Z in one spot. I'm building little mini houses. I want to empower all minorities, Black, Latin, Asian, whoever wants to learn the game to come up and learn it from us hands-on and give them the knowledge they need to go either land a position with us at Cookies or come work for one of y'all and get in the game. So just providing knowledge and passion and love, that's what my journey is, and making sure that everywhere we go, we keep genuine operators in business. It's tough to see people that get in that have like this Pottery Barn style mentality where it's like, this ain't no weed store. What is this? Like, I didn't come to buy a cookbook. This ain't what it is. Like, talk to me about the weed. What do you got? What does it taste like? Like, why do you like it? Why is it better than this? So, my journey is simple. I'm a pothead that loves weed, and I want to keep people like ourselves in the business, and I'm going to do everything I can to do it.
Thanks, man. Definitely. I'm definitely going to pull up on that Humboldt campus, man. And it's like you said, like Wanda said, man, it takes us to lead and uplift our own. So it's super dope to hear that you're doing that. We're looking forward to the success of that. And hope, man, my homegirl, I think you could talk about a lot of the things that everybody's spoken about. Because I think one of the things with you, of course, you having that background coming from finance, you were able to look at the cannabis industry very early on and realize the opportunity to create generational wealth. But you being a family business, you and your mom really building this. I'm sure you've had your share of, it hasn't been easy, right? So, I love to hear you talk about, your background. Also, you're my HBCU sister, I'm sure,
Yes.
Being a Spelman woman has prepared you, for this journey. So I just love to hear you share, a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is, we're known as one of the most affluent Black counties in the United States. So I grew up around Black excellence. I saw a lot of doctors, lawyers, just business professionals that look just like me. I was raised by one. My mother is a dentist by trade, and she actually started her dental practice the year I was born. 2 years after she graduated from dental school. My mom has literally never worked for anyone other than herself her whole life. She's also in real estate, and she's like literally bred me to be a mini her. Has taken me everywhere with her, taught me everything I know, and she raised me to be free thinking, to be open-minded, and to look at things with an alternative view and to not put myself in a box. I always challenged myself, even from a young age, to go above and beyond and to help others. And I think for me, the cannabis industry was a way for me to culminate all of that into one thing. So I attended Spelman College. I've done a lot of different things. A lot of people like from different parts of my life don't even understand like, how did you do all that at once? But I did investment banking. I was also a Falcons cheerleader. I've also been on a reality show, and now I own a cannabis business. I've done a lot of different stuff. But my background in finance, I was an economics major at Spelman. I interned at a few investment banks on Wall Street and then ended up at an investment bank in Atlanta, Georgia. Out of school, I was doing equity institutional sales. So I was pretty much like selling stock research to hedge fund managers and mutual fund managers and just any type of fund manager and getting them to trade on our information. Like I said, my mom definitely raised me to think with an entrepreneurial spirit. And she also raised me to think about how we could create a legacy for our family and also create a blueprint for other Black families to do the same. Because although I grew up in an area where, yeah, I saw a lot of successful Black people, but a lot still in that same environment, I didn't see a lot of people leaving things behind for their families and really creating legacy. And creating generational wealth. And that's something that, especially my time in investment banking, I'm meeting these kids and I'm like, what, your dad taught you how to do this when you were 10 and y'all, you've had a trust set up your whole life? What's the trust? You know, like these were questions that I had going into college, you know, and I'm meeting these people, they're like, you don't know what that is, you know, snotty from Harvard. And I'm just like, no, I don't. And I realized that there was this disconnect from the middle class Black community. And the idea of creating generational wealth just wasn't in it. And even in the white middle class community that was there. So I realized, okay, there's a disconnect. When I really understood where the cannabis industry was growing to, I realized that this would be an industry that could potentially be that beacon of hope and opportunity for Black people. So I remember the day that I was like, okay, I'm going full force towards this. I was looking at CNBC and they were talking about the growth of the industry over the next 10 years. And it was a line straight like this. I've never seen that before in a chart, talking about the growth of an industry for 10 years. I've never seen that type of growth. And I said, okay, so this is going to be the largest emerging industry of my lifetime. And it was built on the backs of Black and brown people. And I'm seeing the people that were getting in, this is 2014 that I'm talking about. I'm seeing ex-senators, investment bankers, people that I knew that I used to work at JP Morgan with and Goldman that were getting into the industry. I was like, wait a minute, this don't look right. I also realized I was going to quickly get priced out, that I wasn't independently wealthy. I wouldn't be able to compete with big boys once the industry got too big. So I realized, okay, I got to get in at the ground floor level. And if you look at a garage closing, I feel like the garage was like this close to closing and I just like slid right in. Just legalized medical cannabis. And I began to go through the laws, go through the 600-page bill that had just been approved. And I realized that they would be licensing companies within the next few months. My mother and I banded together. We formed a very small team, me, her, our third co-founder, who is an oral surgeon here in this area, and my now store manager, the four of us, who I've known the four of them or the three of them pretty much my whole life. Of course, my mom, my whole life. And we applied for a license and were fortunate enough to win. I now realize that that was divine intervention, because when I say we didn't know what the heck we were doing, we didn't know what the heck we were doing at that time. But we and Dr. Bryant lifted me up and put me on their shoulders. We bootstrapped the entire process. I began getting a lot of national recognition as the youngest Black woman to be in the space. And that gave me a platform to inspire other people. I now understand that my purpose in life is to inspire and leave a blueprint. And I'm so thankful that I've been able to connect with a lot of the people on this call to be able to continue that journey. I've learned so much, and I hope that other people can take my journey and avoid the mistakes that I made, the money and time spent and wasted to get to where I am. And I'm going to continue to grow and thrive, as difficult as this industry is and as tired as I get. I'm going to continue to push forward because I love this industry from every aspect. I love the economic opportunity of the industry. I love the plant. I've been a consumer since I was a little girl too. And a lot of people don't believe, or, well, people who know me well believe it. But, a lot of people don't think that when they first meet me. I'm like, no, I was the girl who was 14 who tried weed and was like, oh, I like this. And I continue to do it. And I mean, if I didn't have weed through college, I probably wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have made it on Wall Street without it. I mean, for me, it really, if not, I would be on prescription medicine for anxiety, 1,000%. But yeah, I was always a consumer, so I loved it from that aspect. That's probably what made it so easy for me to jump right in and not be stigmatized, about the industry when I did go after it. But the other part that really fuels me that I didn't understand at the time, but that now I'm really passionate about, is the emphasis on social equity and the opportunity to have this industry be an example of how we can be truly equitable from every aspect. So I love being able to lead that and pioneer that. I'm on the board of Supernova Women, which is an amazing organization, nonprofit that was started in Oakland that has done a lot of work around social equity legislation. And we've been an example for states as they create their different processes. I know we've worked with people even in New York. So I'm really proud to be a part of that organization. And I do a lot of work around advocacy and social equity. And that's what I truly care about. And also continuing to grow my business to give people opportunity, much like Berner has done. Berner, I look at you as an example. Wanda, I know we've talked a billion times. I look at you guys as blueprints. As Shayoun and I really grow our businesses, we look at each other as, partners in this, and we help each other all the time. I'm just really thankful to be able to push this message.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, also thankful for each of you guys for inspiring and doing that in the way you're doing business. And Melissa, I would also love to hear your story, but for you and I, who are more so on the policy and advocacy side of the industry, I think it's really important that we make sure. So in addition to talking about, your story and journey in cannabis, could you talk a little bit about social equity policy, some of the things that you think we need to see to ensure not only economic security for Black and Brown people, but also I think that was talked about social justice, right? It's important to recognize that we have people that are in jail for life, right? Like people that are incarcerated, people that have been picking cotton, while there's an industry that's making millions and billions of dollars. So I would love for you to just talk a little bit about the importance of policy, as well as set the stage for people listening who may not be as well versed in where we are kind of from a national legalization standpoint, as well as some of what's been going on in the different states.
It's absolutely crucial. When I think about, my journey within this space, I grew up in LA at the peak of, the drug war there. And I was seeing the ways in which, our communities were just being targeted, how vastly different enforcement looked in downtown LA and South Central LA, where I spent a lot of time, versus on the west side of Los Angeles. And that wasn't off of anything that was actually being done differently by people in those spaces. It was the real laser targeted enforcement and the way in which law enforcement in particular was using cannabis as an excuse and as a justification. And so really seeing just from that level, from my colleagues, on the ground, Cassandra Frederique, who led our New York policy office, the Drug Policy Alliance, for a decade in New York, being very clear that this wasn't about the plant. This wasn't about the pharmacology. This wasn't about anything actually having to do with cannabis, but this was an excuse that law enforcement, the policymakers were using to excuse and to justify racist enforcement and behavior that was targeting specific communities. And when we look at New York, those 800,000 arrests we were talking about before, under decriminalization, with the vast majority of those being people of color, despite the fact that people use at similar rates in New York. So, when we look at New York City as a prime example of that, in 2020, last year, even after we passed through a further decriminalization bill in 2019, when we didn't get adult use over the finish line in the right way, and we held off because we recognized this needed to have restitution for communities. This needed to actually go through in the proper way in New York, not just any which way, right? But even despite that, and during the pandemic last year, 94% of the people who were caught up in cannabis enforcement in New York City were Black and Latinx. And that is not reflective of use patterns. If anything, data from the Department of Health shows it's basically the inverse. We know that white people in New York City actually consume at much higher rates. And so when we're talking about the largest cannabis market in the country, estimated at $3 billion right now in New York, as we were building out the campaign and really talking about what it would mean to move into adult use legalization, it was clear that we can't just flip the script and act as though these last decades upon decades of harm didn't actually take place, and that there wasn't something very specifically owed to the people, the individuals, and the communities that had been at the brunt of that for decades. And especially as we're talking about within COVID too, we know that it's the same communities that were hit the hardest by the marijuana arrest crusade and the racial disparities in enforcement, as well as looking at economic vulnerability just over decades because of all of the additional consequences that come along with that criminalization. And then looking at the COVID impacts as well, it's just time and time again, because of the same structural factors, it's the same neighborhoods, the same zip codes, when you actually drill down to that level, that are having the impacts time and time again. So as we're talking about rebuilding and coming out of this, it was very clear, from the campaign level, from the sponsors level, that this has to be just as comprehensive as the harm that was done in New York. So if we're going to talk about the fact that people had their babies ripped away from their arms just because of a positive tox on a urine sample at the hospital that was given, or that was taken rather, without that person's consent even, and when it's only Black and Latinx women and parenting people being charged with those types of things and having their families torn apart, we know something's wrong, right? You can't have ACS going and taking children away from their parents in some neighborhoods. And then on the flip side, you have white moms talking about in the New York Times how smoking weed makes them a better parent. Those things are fundamentally unacceptable to have coexisting in the exact same place in the exact same time. And so building out the campaign in such a way that was going to address all of this universe of harm that had happened, and do so in a way that, like you were saying, not every single person of those 800,000 instances of arrest and criminalization is going to translate into somebody owning a business. So there has to be that community restitution, the community reinvestment piece from the tax revenue that's going to go back. And then also, we have to build up the industry and put resources in place and anticipate what the barriers and challenges are going to be based on what we've seen in other states. New York is now number 15. Unfortunately, we could be the leader in trying to address a lot of these issues and get things right, but we're not the leader in terms of going out front. So we can look at what happened in Colorado, in Massachusetts, in California, and be able to make adjustments and build out the program in a different way based on that. And so that's where you see the cooperatives licenses, on-site consumption licenses coming in, the incubator program that'll actually have low and zero interest loans and those resources out of the gate. All of that is an attempt, at least, to address the landscape that we've seen take place in other states that have legalized, and to not fall into the same traps, to not make the same mistakes in New York. And then further, making sure that the people who are part of the legacy market, who have been in this space, who've been able to provide for families when they were blocked out of the formal economy in so many other ways, also have the ability to participate in this industry going forward. So ensuring that people are not banned out of being able to get a license just because of prior criminal legal contact, and being very, very clear about that.
Now, that's absolutely so critical. Like you said, it starts with the policy, having those things in place for people to be able to accomplish the goals of what they're doing. And again, just want to first say, I want to thank Reverend Sharp, the National Action Network, for giving us this platform again to be able to have this important conversation. This is definitely, for me, legendary, like I said, to have people that are actually out here doing it, leading the way, not only from policy, but building these businesses is so critical. And something that touching on something Wanda said again, it really is important for us because we are on the NAN platform. It's important that we get the support from Black business, Black money, Black finance, Black community, Black and brown businesses without having your support and really, understanding what's going on in the industry. I think it's really a really critical piece to us getting to where we are. So again, I think that we have some great people for you to all listen and get some experience from. And I really hope that you all will reach out to them. I know they're all very active and visible. Probably read about them in any magazine, anytime you Google cannabis. But I would love for each person to give some closing thoughts. Let people know where they can find you and find your business, and anything that you might want to share that you think would help to empower, and help shed some light on where we are in the conversation. So, got to go, ladies first. So I'll start with Wanda.
Thank you. Thank Al Sharpton for bringing us all together. I always enjoy talking about, my favorite subject. But just to keep hitting it home, we need Black dollars. We need brown dollars. Asking white organizations to prop up our businesses, it makes zero sense. And we need us to start thinking about what this is. And this is no longer an industry that is based in chance or funny money or whatever else. This is real industry, real business. And the amount of white-owned companies and hedge funds that are investing in it, I am pleading with big Black business to jump in because we need you. Hands down, we need you. I can be found on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Wanda L. James, all the way around, and my company, Simply Pure Brands. You can see us doing what we do and growing, hopefully, bigger, better, stronger. Thank you, and thanks to here for doing this.
Always a pleasure. And then Hope, how about you, Miss?
Yes. So again, thank you, NAN, for having us. I want to shout out Alik McMillan, works for NAN, and Reverend, good friend of mine. Thank you for having me on this platform. Every young Black girl that feels like they have to stay in a box and just be this one specific type of person. You can be everything you want to be, and you can be anyone you want to be, and you can do anything you want to do. I've done that, and I'm going to continue to do that. So I just want to give you that hope and inspiration that you can be everything that you want. You can dream as big as you want. If you want to own an airplane one day, you can. That's what I just want to let you know. So if you want to follow my journey, I'm not even 30 yet. I got a lot more left in me. So if you want to follow everything I'm going to be doing in my life, I'm most active on Instagram right now. You can follow me at I am Hope So Dope. That's my handle on Twitter too. And funny story, people have been calling me that since. And you can also find me at hopewiseman.com. You can follow my dispensary at Mary and Main on every major platform. And just be on the lookout for us. We're doing some great things. We're going to introduce our parent company, Wise Co., at the end of this year. So I'm super excited about that. We're getting into other areas of the industry besides just retail. So continue to follow us, watch us, and continue to reach for the stars. They're there for us.
Thank you, Hope. Appreciate you. And Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, I just want to offer so much gratitude again to Reverend Al Sharpton, to National Action Network for hosting this conversation, and for really being part of the entire discussion in New York around how we actually legalize the right way, how we get marijuana justice, leave people behind that's going to block people out, being intentional about getting community reinvestment and restitution, repairing the harms. And I just want to invite people to be part of this process. You know, it obviously, as Wanda was saying, as folks were saying before, needs to happen on the federal level now. It's not enough. You know, we've now gone, it's 16 states. Like this whole piecemeal approach, like we have to actually move to end federal prohibition once and for all, to do so in a way that is comprehensive, that is rooted in justice, in racial and economic equity, and making sure that we are building out ownership opportunities for the people that have been the most impacted, and putting resources back into communities as well. So, we're calling on Congress to pass the MORE Act through the House again. It passed through at the end of last year. The new Congress, they can move that through in the House of Representatives right now. We know that Senator Schumer is talking with Senator Booker and Senator Wyden about building out what the Senate legalization bill is going to look like, really building off of the MORE Act, and I think going even further in terms of the restitution that's required. So really pushing people, be part of this moment, raise your voices, tap into this conversation, be part of talking to your elected officials, whether it's at the local level, the state level, and at the federal level, to say that we are demanding change. No longer are we going to accept this, and we have to move forward into a different era, both at the state level and at the federal level, that is actually no longer going to criminalize, but is actually going to be focused on repairing that harm and doing right. And then pulling the drug war out of so many other aspects of people's lives too. We just launched with Drug Policy Alliance recently this project called Uprooting the Drug War that talks about, the child welfare implications, the education, the housing, employment, public benefits, all of these other systems that have been impacted as well by the sort of domino effect of the drug war. And how do we pull that out? And how do we get to a place where people are able to live their lives live their lives with dignity, and not be further criminalized by these policies that we know have been wielded against folks for way too long. So just encourage folks to follow us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Drug Policy Org and Drug Policy Alliance. Just really appreciate all of the support.
Thank you. And my guy, Shayun, what up?
I got so emotional while she was talking. I was just sitting there nodding my head the whole time, just because I was like, I hope everyone listening to her understand what she's saying, because a lot of times I think we're just not educated on what our rights are, and we miss out on so many things, and we see so many injustice just because of the lack of education. So I just got so emotional, like I was shaking my leg. I was like, oh my God, yes, and yes. Like it's really important that people really hear what she's saying. Like it's just lack of miseducation, lack of not knowing what we have the ability to do and what our rights are. I think it's so important that we know. It's really important because once I knew what my rights were, I became empowered, right? So that's all I have to say. And in regards to business advice, I would say, when you get into business, while you negotiate your honeymoon, negotiate your divorce. I think a lot of people get emotional and they put their feelings into business. My biggest advice is please take your feelings out of it. If you want to win, don't take it personal. Try to find win-win situations. It's not, you're not gonna get everything you want, but understand what are you willing to give up to get to where you want to go. A lot of people don't even get started. They just look at I'm like, just get started. You're gonna fall. You're gonna make mistakes. It's okay. It's part of life. Everybody falls. Everybody makes mistakes. Get back up. Don't beat yourself up. I think that was one of my biggest lessons. I was like, what about if I failed? That was what, and my friends were gonna laugh at me and look at me. It was like, I knew he was gonna fail. Like that was a possibility in my head that I thought about, and I was nervous about it. So all I'm saying is everybody's scared, everybody's nervous. The only thing you have to do is just take a step, just take a leap of faith. That's it.
All right, you forgot to tell us where they can follow you on social, bro. Follow Elevate.
You can follow me at Elevate Cannabis and at CannaBAC. And I'm Nigerian, so it means the Cannabis King.
I
Stay
appreciate
elevated.
you, bro. And absolutely, last but not least, Burn, tell people where they can find you and Cookies, man.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Burner415 or Cookies Enterprises. I want to thank Reverend Al Sharpton, everyone involved for making this happen. I would like to encourage that we use his platform to get us in the room with some of these people discussing federal legalization. We're the ones dealing with 280E and all these crazy things. We're the ones having to act like criminal. I've been kicked out of every bank you can imagine for my music, for my clothing, for cotton. I sell clothing to huge stores all around the world, not one cash deposit. And because I'm Cookies, I can't bank. And so there's a lot of obstacles, and I would love to see this group come together and network every way possible. And I would love to see this group have bigger discussions with those discussing legalization, as we've been dealing with a lot of problems on the ground. You know, it's good for them that they're discussing it now, but you know, Chuck Schumer has to have people like us in the room with him to discuss all these years of business that we put in. So I would love to encourage Reverend Al Sharpton to use some of his platform and his power to put us in the room with the people making the decisions, because we could do a lot of justice to those out there. And I want to thank all of you guys for your time today. And I love conversations like this. And if any of y'all need to reach out, I'll make my number available. Knowledge is key. Networking is key. And I would love to work with every one of y'all. So thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely make sure we all connect offline after the call. Again, thank you again, Reverend Sharpton and NAN, and Burn, absolutely everything you said. That really is my biggest goal. So I was, super happy to have all of y'all together, especially for this. And I'll say it's certainly my new intention in my new role, starting out as the head of social justice, social equity at the U.S. Cannabis Council and Marijuana Policy Project, to bring traditional social justice organizations like NAN, who are so critical just to the empowerment and this movement around us as people of color. It's time we change the conversation. We don't have time to wait anymore. Legalization is right around the corner, and it's important that we have the real insight of people that are really running these businesses, right? Like, this is what me and Wanda talk about. Like, we need the insight of Black folks that are actually running these cannabis businesses. We need the insight of our people. We can't have anybody else tell us what's good for us anymore. We're here. So I'm looking forward to working together with all of y'all. National Action Network, again, thanks for having us and thanks for tuning in. I hope y'all enjoyed and learned a little something along the way. Peace.